Okay, hi. So I'm going to talk today about uh, why you should go for housing repair, some of the reasons why people don't do housing repair, and my thoughts on that. So essentially, housing disrepair is, if you can remember the first time you walked into your accommodation and you saw how it looked and it was, quite clean, spick and span. Yeah. That is the standard which you should expect from your landlord. Now, providing that you haven't done anything to damage uh, that sort of your home and caused any disrepair, then that is the standard which your landlord should be keeping and maintaining with your property. So, for example, and this is quite important to understand, uh, disrepair is different than improvements. So if you walk into your accommodation, everything's happy, everything's spick and span, uh, and then 4 years later, there's upgrades on the kitchen in your neighborhood or on your estate, or upgrades in the bathroom, for example, but they haven't done yours. You couldn't take them to court for disrepair because that's not a disrepair, that's an improvement from the landlord. Yeah. So that's something to be wary of. So disrepair is for when things have gone downhill from the time you've got them. That's the first thing. So you have the landlord's got an obligation in which to carry out those repairs, and more importantly, you've got to give them uh, some time, if you like, to be able to. So you need to be able to give your landlord enough time to rectify the repairs. What often happens, and I'll come on to that a little bit later, but if you see something and it needs repairing and fixing, you report that matter to them, and they should, within a reasonable amount of time, carry out that repair. Now, I want to talk about some of the reasons as to why people don't uh, have their repairs done. The frequent one, which I've heard tenants mention, is that they complained about it many years ago, sometimes as long as 10, 15 years ago. It was a big issue. They've made complaints. The housing association have or council have ignored those complaints. They haven't dealt with it. And so, the tenant has just become fed up with making the complaint. And so, because they're fed up with making the complaint, they're just living in and with that disrepair. Uh, what a solicitor wants to hear from you is that you've made complaints, the landlord has failed to carry out the repair when requested, and you've made a number of complaints. If you can record the complaints when you made the complaints, that's important. Maybe you made a telephone call, write on in your diary or something. Or also ask them for a reference number, and that means it's on their system that that complaint has been logged. Usually, they'd like to hear that you made a complaint within the last 6 months. So it could be something which has been going on for 5 or 10 years, but you've made a complaint in the last 3 to 6 months, and they still haven't sorted it out. Now, what's important for you to understand is that any calculation of compensation is generally based on the length of time you've had that disrepair in regards to when it was reported. Obviously, if it has if it hasn't been reported, the landlord isn't aware of it. So don't suffer in silence. What often happens, and one of the reasons why tenants don't uh, sort of make claims against their landlords, are a couple of misunderstandings. The first one is that they fear that they may be evicted. That's illegal, and especially within social housing. If there's a repair which is required to be carried out, yeah, the fault is with the landlord, not with the tenant, and there should be no retribution. Consider this: when you don't pay your rent, your landlord is very quick to send letters demanding that you keep up with your payments. You probably have to wait about a month before you start getting letters. Yeah. Well, it's shoes on the other foot. They have to deal with that disrepair. So you won't get evicted, not with social housing as a basis of the disrepair. If you fall into arrears, that's another matter. And indeed, when a solicitor looks at your case, they will want to know the level of your arrears. Typically speaking, they don't want to see more than 3 months worth of arrears on your account. Part of the reason is because, if you do get compensation, all that money on compensation is going to go back to the solicitors, um, because of the amount, or not to the solicitors, to your landlord, because of the outstanding rental amount. So solicitors don't want to take that on. They want to take on that you've complained, and you've complained relatively recently, that you don't have much arrears. That's another important element. The other element, obviously, is that the amount of disrepair is of a nature whereby it's worth the solicitor getting out of bed to do the repair. So, as I said before, if you are a number 111, and for one reason or other, the number one has dropped off on either side of your number, so it's showing 11, but that is not really just cause for the solicitors to get onto your landlord. So then, it's something you could do yourself. Yeah, it's an array of things. So, for example, it might be that your window is not closing correctly. That in and of itself might not warrant a claim being made. But if it's a number of issues, windows not being closed, extractor fan not working, damp and mold, etc., then that all adds up, and that comes a part of the claim. The other element, what you have to consider, and this is something which many people don't consider, and that is sometimes what happens is that, let's supposing you have mold in your bathroom, and that mold, or in your front room even, and the mold is such that you're fed up with complaining, it's there. You do make efforts to try and reduce it yourself, but it's still there. And so you don't want to invite people over to your place because simply you're a little bit ashamed of the condition of your place. Well, what's happening there is you're factoring in the landlord's disrepair into your life, and it's affecting your life and your standard of living. But you can't invite people round to your accommodation simply because of the state of the place, simply because the landlord hasn't carried out their obligations. Yeah. So that's affecting your life. It can also affect, obviously, your health, your physical health, in terms of respiratory issues, such as asthma, uh, breathing problems, coming out in rashes, the mold. The damp creates mold. The mold has spores. Those spores create health issues. And you may complain to your doctor about certain health issues, not realizing that they're related to the condition of your accommodation. All right. So that's something to consider, because if you make a claim, you can make a claim not only for the disrepair, but also for the physical and mental effect that disrepair has had on you. Now, don't be shy on this. Yeah. We pay generally a lot of taxes in this country, a lot of taxes. Uh, we we make that payment, and we obey lots of laws, and we do that in regards to citizenship and being a citizen. Well, part and parcel of being a citizen is that you've got rights, and we here in the UK are a little bit shy in enforcing our rights. We're a bit scared of enforcing our rights, but you have every right to enforce your rights. Okay, so not putting in a claim simply because you're scared or the law, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Yeah, you've got rights. You shouldn't have to be living from a mental situation detriment or physical detriment because of your living environment, which is a responsibility of your landlord. Yeah, you need to enforce your rights. They're there for you. A lot of people fought hard and died for those rights to come into existence. Don't be ashamed of claiming your rights. Another reason why some people don't pursue for claims is that they've done it before, and it didn't go anywhere for whatever reason. It could be that the people who you chose weren't very active, um, or maybe it got didn't get resolved. Whatever the reason, what happened last time, you shouldn't start thinking that's the same. It's a bit like saying, I went to a restaurant once, the food wasn't very good, so I'm not going to go to restaurants ever again. Never. Or we're going to be, maybe that sounds ridiculous. Maybe it's, I went to an Indian restaurant once, the food was terrible. I'm never ever going to eat an Indian again. You can't judge the whole thing. You can't judge the whole legal profession based on the performance of one legal firm. Yeah, that's what you need to understand. The other level is the amount of work it requires for you to have a claim. There is no amount of work really. It's very, very minimal. It consists of, number one, a surveyor coming round to make sure that the things what you're complaining about meet a threshold which is worth the solicitor to come round. Number two, uh, a solicitor might send a properly quantified surveyor to carry out a more thorough investigation. That requires you opening the door, having the time and space for about an hour for them to carry out a proper work. That's it. That is it. That is the effort. So if you've done it once and it didn't come to anywhere, it doesn't really matter, because if someone else does it, it's only going to cost you about an hour of your time. Yeah. Um, just to put you in the picture, I myself had gone through this. The reason why I got into this gig, if you like, is because I myself was a tenant, and my neighbour said that she wasn't happy about some of the things in her flat, but directly below me. I was like, okay, fine, a bit like a lot of you guys, you go do what you're going to do, and she did go and do what she's going to do, what she wanted to do, and they carried out those repairs, and they carried it out in a timely manner, and she got compensated by it, and she was very happy about it. When I saw that, that put me into gear, and I started to pull my finger out, and I started making complaints about some of the things which had needed to be done for quite some time. And long story short, we got a claim. Uh, the actual figure itself was £6,000, of which we had to pay 25% at that particular time to the solicitors. Yeah. Um, so, walking away with £4,500, it was worth it. Yeah. The only downside I found at the time was, number one, uh, the uh, the landlord was dragging their heels out about the amount of compensation. I think it was between £4,000 and £6,000. They were haggling between the two. And it was just keeping up to date, asking the solicitor what's going on. Solicitor should generally keep you informed, but any good solicitor will just keep you up regularly informed. If you're not too sure, you just leave a message and they'll get back. It's not difficult in this day and age of emails, texting, etc. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. If, like I say, if you've complained and nothing happened, just start all over again with a new set of solicitor. You're not always going to get the same result. If they keep saying the same particular reason, as in it doesn't meet the threshold or it doesn't meet the threshold, then maybe that's the case. But ultimately speaking, you haven't had to work for a whole day. You haven't had to dig a big pit or a big hole. You've simply given time for someone to assess the situation and make a comment on it. Yeah. Where we live has a very big impact on how we feel in our lives and also for our families. If you have children, and you've heard of the case of a young child unfortunately dying quite recently because of the mold and the damp, yeah, these children are suffering. They're going through their childhood, the most important years of their life, seeing some of the squalor which has got nothing to do with you. Now, my experience on tenants, uh, I they can be divided into, I'll divide them into three for simplicity's sake. Say you got one extreme and the other extreme, and I'm going to talk about stereotypes if you like. Okay, so you tend to have the English middle-aged couple, usually the wife, who's got very, very high standards as to how her place should be. They're very, very house proud. Their houses generally tend to look quite immaculate. They've done work on their kitchens, they've done work on their bathrooms, their bedrooms are palatial. It looks like a hotel. However, there's a little bit of damp somewhere or a little bit of something. And because their standards are so high, they are very, very, it really annoys them, really annoys them. And they want to pursue a legal case. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we can't do anything. Yeah. Your standards are so high that, reasonably speaking, yeah, it doesn't warrant intervention from the landlord to make that repair. You've done a good job. Yeah. On the other extreme, you have people with depression, mental illness, depression, and maybe schizophrenia. They just can't cope with life in general, and they've let things slide. Now, when that happens, obviously there's going to be a lot of clutter around, things not, plates not washed up. These are usually male, usually men, very rare to see women in such bad state, and they're just not coping. They're not coping. Maybe there's been a death in the family or something, or they've lost their job or a breakdown or something. Now, what tends to happen, and what we tend to see, is that there's a mixture between the squalor and the actual disrepair in and of itself. So even if the disrepair was sorted out, it wouldn't really change the state of the environment, of the overall accommodation, simply because they've left it in such squalor themselves. So it's very hard. And in that situation, it's very hard to assess whether they've been responsible for the disrepair or it is the tenant's, the landlord's fault. Yeah. So we need to be a bit cognitive of that. Yeah. In order to assess that. Then there's everybody in the middle. And people in the middle, you get a lot of sort of migrant type families. When I mean migrant, it could be first generation, second generation. They have quite large accommodation, but they're overcrowded. Yeah. And because they're overcrowded, there's so much stuff in the place, and that creates issues. It can create damp, and sometimes the local authorities will put the blame on on the household or on the tenants unfairly, unjustifiably, simply because it's overcrowded and there's lots of clutter. Yeah. So you need to be a bit aware and cognitive of that. Yeah, do you have a contribution? Are you contributing to the disrepair? That needs to be understood. So in time scale, the time scale for a disrepair to generally be sorted out from the beginning of the claim to the end of the claim, you're looking at between 3 months to 12 months from start to finish. Yeah. If you got it done in 3 months, that'd be quite fast. 6 months, it's pretty good. 9 to 12 months probably be like the average. There's certain levels you need to think about, and the landlord needs to think about. There's the pre-trial situation whereby they've been notified of what needs to be done and given time in which to do it. And then they might make a recommendation for some type of compensation. Now, if your local authorities are good and smart, they'll sort it out way before it gets to the legal stage of going to court. It takes time for these things to go to court. Yeah. If they're silly and they want to argue the toss about it, then they will let it drag on and drag on and drag on. Now, the disadvantage for them for letting it drag on and drag on and drag on is that the legal costs, which they would have to pay to the solicitor, are rising, rising, rising. And trust me, those legal costs can be very high. Coming on to legal costs, when they say it is no win, no fee, that's exactly what it is. You don't have to pay anything towards the solicitor taking on the case out of your own pocket. Generally, what happens is that they will get a percentage of the compensation which is awarded to you. That can be anything generally from 25% to 50%. The actual solicitor's legal fees you don't pay, providing you stick to the rules. Now, within the legal profession, they've got a type of insurance, if you like a legal insurance, which is that if they do lose the case, in that rare exception, but they lose the case, it's covered by insurance. When you sign a contract or agreement, you're literally giving them permission to be able to insure this claim. And you'll see something in there. So like £400-500, something like blah blah blah. Right? It's like that is like the legal insurance of the case, the claim, and you're literally giving them permission to take that insurance in your name. You don't pay anything. You don't pay anything. But the way in which they reduce having to pay any of that insurance is obviously by the initial survey, which is carried out to make sure that there are things have been in disrepair, which the landlord is obligated to do so. Yeah. They can't have a situation where they're losing many cases, otherwise their premiums will go up, and then it would just be, as a business model for the solicitor, it would just be not viable, not viable. So, but that's sort of in the background, if you like, which you don't really need to, get into. If you want to be you want to be meticulous and read every line. When you say, click if you accept the terms and conditions. If you're one of those people on the internet who will read through the 30 pages of the terms and conditions, and that's something which was worth you knowing. But in practical terms, when it's no win, no fee, that's exactly what it is. There's no catch or anything like that. You have a calling off period of about 14 days if you want to change your mind anyway. Okay. But there's no particular catch. The business model for the solicitors is that a disrepair has occurred. You've made complaints and you've given them reasonable time to address those complaints. And so now they're going to take it on. And the repairs are of such a level that it's worth them taking on. So I hope that has helped you out. And if you've got any questions or queries, by all means, put them in the comments below. And I look forward to speaking to you about the next situation.